So I grew up in a very rural environment, and the thing that I really liked most in life, the thing which makes me still very happy, was being outside in this very marshy and wild place, which in this picture is from the New Forest. And what made me really angry was seeing how the impact of human activity was altering that nature. So basically, I had a real hate for litter and waste, which you find, unfortunately, all over the countryside. What I think is that when you're a child, when you're growing up, you have a very strong sense of your own values. And values are very interesting because they kind of form our character. They shape our decisions, and they influence our actions. And the more that we are guided by our values, our own values, the more we reinforce them. So it's kind of like a self-reinforcing loop. And there's an interesting organisation called the Public Institute Research Centre, who've worked a lot on values, and what they say is that actually, as human beings, we share across the world 60 or so universal values, values that everybody has, but as individuals, we tend to lean on, we tend to choose certain of those values as the ones which are most important to us, and that is partly what makes us all different. Interestingly, what I think happens is that when you're growing up, you have this very strong sense of values, and then they kind of begin to change as you get just about the point where you're leaving school. And instead of your decisions and your ideas and your direction being shaped by your skills, by your values, they tend to be shaped by your skills. So this is how I ended up being a product designer in Milan, in the height of Milan's success of being the centre of design. I was really good at what I did, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But I felt always that I was sort of part of a system that was all about basically getting people to buy more stuff, to consume more stuff. I was part of what Jonathan Porritt calls that hedonic treadmill, which is very, very difficult to leave. And my job really was all about waste. It was all about generating the thing that I hated the most. And actually, in a very, very simple term, you could say that what I was doing was designing very beautiful landfill. And this was obviously in very strong conflict with my inner values. And there was a point at which I felt so uncomfortable about this that I really felt I had to change something in my profession, change something that I was doing. The thing is that the waste I was creating, the post-consumer waste, statistically, 98% of everything we purchase is thrown away within 6 months. So it's a really short period of ownership, and everything ends up here. But this is just the tip of the landfill site. Actually, the truth is that to produce 1 tonne of a product generates 40 tonnes of waste. It's hugely wasteful to create products. So I thought to myself, what can I possibly do? What can I do? I'm a designer. I'm in a one-way trap. So I tried to think of all kinds of things I might do which would allow me to be a designer and not design stuff. And I ended up trying lots of interesting experiments, things which were not products, services, or I was working with businesses to get them have different ideas about where their future might go, which was not connected to consumption and unit sales as a way of generating revenue. I worked with students to try to get them to think differently about their design skills, trying to make them think first about systems. What kind of systems do we need before they focused on what kind of products do we need? The great flaw in this idea was that I still had a product design business in the background, which was basically subsidizing this really interesting work that I was doing on the side. So I was doing a little bit of good stuff, and it was all funded by a lot of bad stuff. So that didn't quite work for me either. So I decided at a certain point that what I needed to do was get rid of all my clients, stop trying to solve my clients' problems, and begin trying to use my design skills to address societal and environmental problems. The question was, could I, as a designer, earn a living, generate revenue out of addressing those kind of issues? So I did a master's course, which was a creative entrepreneurship, and I ended up at the end of this little master's course doing a project. Everyone had to do a project, and the project I did was based on a problem. I thought, okay, let's pick a problem and see if you can make money out of addressing a problem. So I did a bit of research, and I found out that the single most complained about issue in Milan City Council, where I lived, was dog poo. Anyone ever been to Milan? Yeah, okay, so if you've been to Milan, then you'll know that it's very difficult in Milan, you know, to look at the buildings and the artifacts and the beauty around you. You've got to watch the pavement because, you know, it's really dirty. It's probably the shittiest city I've ever been to. I also found out subsequently, when I did a bit more research, that dog poo is in the top 3 of almost every council across Europe. So it's a really big issue. So I thought, okay, let's have a try. If I can make money out of dog poo, I can probably make money out of anything, yeah? So we did this project. Turns out I worked with an engineer, we were awarded the best prize, the best entrepreneurial project of our group, and we were offered funding and a place in an incubator. So it was really cool, you know, this was really going to happen. And one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my life was turning down the funding. I had to turn it down because when this was all ready to go and we knew that we knew this was going to happen, I thought, do I really want to spend the next 5 years of my life building a business around dog poo? Probably not. It's not the kind of challenge that I was really interested in. It proved a point, but it wasn't the right kind of challenge. And this is why, you know, the kind of thing I really cared about was what impact human activity was having on the planet. And if you look at this graph, which comes from New Scientist, what you can see here, it doesn't matter that you can't read the lines. It starts in 1750 over here and ends in 2000. And what you see is how those various impacts as humans on the planet are not only each one of those extremely critical to our survival, but they're all interconnected and they're all getting worse, all getting stronger. Things like deforestation, overpopulation, consumption of the water tables and overfishing and lots of other issues on which, if we don't do something about it, we are destined to die. We're destined to die out. And these were the kind of challenges that I really felt I needed to be focusing on. And at that point, big drama, decided I couldn't do this in Italy, and I moved back to the UK. I ended up completely by chance at the Royal College of Art, through Imperial College, running a small department, pretty much doing the thing that I always thought needed to be done, changing the way designers perceive what their role is in as designers. And I started to think a lot more about how do you actually get designers to design using their values. We do a lot of interesting work at the RCA. We work with hundreds of students. We don't have any of our own, but we work with hundreds of students from across college, and they are the most creative brains on the planet. Absolutely. In fact, Fortini, who spoke before, was once one of my students. So we have some incredible people coming through the RCA. And the first thing that we do is try to reconnect them with their values to understand what do they really care about. Because if you really care about something, you're going to do a much better project. So first of all, a few graduate projects. This project was created by a group of innovation design engineering students. And what they were worried about was this. They were worried about the way we currently move water around. It's in a really stupid way. We move water around in these very small half-litre PET bottles. So the bottle itself is actually worth a lot more than the water inside it. And in America, we throw away 60 million of those bottles every day. They take thousands of years to decompose in landfill. So it doesn't really make any sense. This group discovered a process by which they could encapsulate water inside an alginate shell. And that alginate shell is so non-toxic that you can eat it, or you can just put it on the ground. Now I know, of course, if you put that alginate shell in your pocket, you're thinking to yourselves, yeah, but I'm going to get a bit of a wet trousers, aren't I? Fair enough, that's true, but this is not a product, it's a provocation. The provocation is, I want you all to think for a minute of how an orange is constructed. An orange is constructed of thousands of tiny pockets of liquid, all encased in a waterproof shell that you can put in your pocket or in your handbag completely safely. So think about the progression of this is a new kind of fruit that will give you water that you can put on the ground afterwards and will provide a nutrient to the soil instead of a toxin. This project is called ENTO, again designed by a group of innovation design engineering students. ENTO's values, core values, was about respect for nature. So our growing populations have an increased hunger for meat, and eating meat has a massive environmental impact. So just think for a minute that 70% of our agricultural land is taken up by livestock production, and 20% of our global greenhouse gas emissions come from the same livestock production. Edible insects is a really interesting way of providing humans with protein in a much more efficient way. So edible insects convert feedstock to protein 9 times more efficiently than cattle do. And also they eat things that people don't want to eat, and neither do cattle. So the stalks of grains, for example, of wheat, edible insects are very happy to eat that. The problem is, how do you get people to move from the current position where they think insects is really disgusting to a position where it's perfectly normal to pick up a box of grasshopper mints on your way home from work? So what they did, the ENTO group, was to create a roadmap of how do we get there, how do we make that cultural shift from disgust to acceptance over a number of years. Very, very interesting project. You can see the video of the ENTO project here. I've put the link in. Equality, another very interesting and very powerful value for many people. Virginia Gardner set up a company called Luwot, and was based on the fact that we have a massive inequality in the world regarding sanitation. So 1/3 of the people in the world don't have access to a toilet. They have no toilet facilities, which is pretty incredible that we have so many people who still don't have adequate sanitation. So Luwot was an interesting shift. In many places in the world where they don't have sanitation, it would be really an awful thing to introduce our water-based sanitation, because particularly in parts of Africa and parts of India, you have huge water stress. So introducing water-based sanitation would be just the wrong thing to do. Luwot is a system, of course, starts with a toilet. The toilet enables you to encapsulate, to capture human waste inside a pod. And then can be safely, the contents of the pod can be safely composted and digested in this anaerobic digester. And this produces a fertilizer, and it also produces a methane. And the methane can then be used by residents of urban slums as a cooking fuel, and it's much cheaper than the cooking fuel that they currently have to buy. Just think for a minute that we have, in the next 20 years, it's estimated that we'll have 1.4 million people moving to urban slums every week. So it's a massive future challenge. And this is a potential a new alternative. Luwot it's been funded by the Gates Foundation, and they're currently piloting this idea in Madagascar, and it's really developing and blossoming now into a new system for sanitation. Social justice. Carmen has produced this new material. The material is called Pinatex, and it is made from the byproduct of the pineapple industry. So it's quite an incredible product. It's a non-woven fabric. It's completely cradle to cradle, which means you can put it on the ground and it will not create any environmental damage. It's a substitute for leather, one of the most toxic materials that we have, and it's ubiquitous in the world, and this is a perfectly reasonable substitute for leather. It's providing a fertilizer and a biomass for farmers in the Philippines, and it's also providing them with a second income stream. And the great thing about this project is it's really replicable, so this can be reproduced across farms in the Philippines where it started, but it can also go beyond. It can go to other crops which have a very fibrous byproduct, of which there are many. I think I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to quickly talk you through another project we did for Camden Council. We have a lot of markets, street markets. Currently, when you go to the market, you go to a food vendor, you buy the food in a polystyrene tray, you eat it or you don't finish it, you look for a bin, the bin's full, you put it on the floor, and a lot of those polystyrene trays end up in the canal or in the parks, on the road. And it's a huge cost to Camden. And the students perceived of a slightly different system, where you might go to the market, you would be given a Tupperware type dish branded with that market. You'd go into the market, fill up the food tray with whatever you wanted, and if you didn't finish it, you can take it home with you. And if you have finished it, you can take it back and reclaim your deposit, and then it's washed and goes back into the circulation. The last project I'll talk about very briefly is called the Chicken Run project, where we've explored how we can design solutions for animal welfare. I won't go into detail because I think I'm running out of time, but we're basically, in this case, putting nature as one of the key stakeholders in the design process. So we're looking at the farmer, we're looking at the consumer, and we're also looking at from the point of view of the chicken. And here are some of the results from that little exploration that we did. A very interesting one was around the food that our poultry eat, because mostly they're eating soya, which is imported from Brazil, which is stimulating deforestation. So this black soldier fly is only a fly for 4 days when it lays eggs and breeds. And then the larvae are actually very, very good at eating things that we don't appreciate, all kinds of food waste or even chicken waste in this case. So the proposal was that we set up, within the chicken sheds, we set up some incubators for black soldier flies where the larvae can be released at the right moment and provide foraging for chickens and also protein. So I could show you hundreds of projects. We have an enormous number of incredibly inspiring projects coming through. I would just encourage you that if you are interested yourselves in really making a difference and changing the way the world works, start by reconnecting with your values. It's really the best place to start. Thank you very much.